This next session, as you obviously know, is Dean Hall, who's showing you DayZ.
So hello everyone, thanks for coming. What I'm going to do sort of today is I'll do a quick overview of the DayZ project for those of you who aren't familiar with it. And then what I'd really like to do is to cut into the QA. So when we do the QA, I'd really like to hear some good questions because we obviously don't make any money from the whole process. So the real thing we want to get back from everyone here is a bit of feedback. You know, if you've got any questions as well. So hold on to those questions, and when we come to it, let it rip. So DayZ, this is your story. So this is just a little about the project. It's an open world survival horror mod for Arma 2. Arma 2 is a military simulator. It's being used for training soldiers all around the world as virtual battle space 2. We released the alpha in April. And originally it wasn't really released. What I did was I put the download link in the one server I was running in New Zealand, and then people somehow managed to figure out how to install it and connect, and then they talked about it and they told their friends, they posted on the forums, and next thing you know, now we have 420,000 unique players. And currently we're running 22,000 concurrent for peak and 10,000 off peak, which is pretty huge numbers really, considering the original data structure and system was designed to handle 100 concurrents and 2 servers. We now have 1,000 servers, so we're getting 110,000 players in a 24-hour period at the moment. So about me, I'm Dean Hall. When I was working as a producer, one of my artists, when I just started my first video game industry, he said I looked like a Glenn. So so I was like, okay, you know, sort of just like, sure enough, I'm a bit shy. It's my first job. And then he said, because there was already a programmer called Glenn there, it got a bit awkward, so they called me Rocket Two Guns because he seemed that was like a Glenn's name. So that's where that comes from. I was originally in the Royal New Zealand Air Force when I left high school. They paid me through university, which was cool. Then I worked as a producer at She Interactive, and then I got really sick of making licensed console games. I'm not going to say any of the games I worked on because you should not buy them ever. In fact, I wanted to camp out with one of them at the store and make sure that nobody bought it. And then so, in disgust, I joined the army, which was kind of random, and then ended up as a multiplayer designer at Bohemia Interactive. So, you know, if you ever get really upset with your job, just join the army and blow stuff up. Right, so DayZ, what is it? So, pretty much you spawn on a beach. You have to scavenge and find the different items that you want to survive in the world. There's no rules, there's no objectives. It was really just designed as a tech demo for something that I'd been pitching for a while. And the players have to deal with all kind of environmental effects, so fractures, yeah, getting injured, bleeding. I'm sure probably most of you are familiar with that. So the only AI that exists in the game are the zombies. The rest of it is all about player interaction, which is really the key thing we wanted as part of the project. So in terms of the development, probably the biggest challenge, so when I was developing the mod, the biggest thing for me about modding is I think modding is kind of, too many mods are emulating games. So they do these big hyped up releases and really cool like concept art and YouTube videos and all sorts of stuff like that. But what I did was developed it in secret, just letting a couple of my friends know what I was doing, getting them to play it and give me really honest feedback. And what they did was it really motivated me to finish it, and it also meant that I could maintain the vision really carefully. Now the challenge is there's so many people that play it, and it's really important that the development team and me engage with everyone, but it's really hard to maintain that vision, and that's probably the biggest challenge that I'm experiencing now, because you get all these great suggestions and ideas, but you've got to try and deal with those and maintain what made it good at the start. So that's probably the hardest part. Meeting capacity has been really difficult. With such rapid growth, we've migrated the server like 6 times. We've actually destroyed, I think, probably about 5 or 6 servers from actually purely overheating. Every time we release an update, the server just dies because everybody connects at once. We sort of have trouble telling the difference between a DDoS and whether or not just some YouTube channel has posted a review on the game. So that makes things pretty interesting. But as part of that, we've had really good feedback from the community. So there's been some really supportive people, like, example, the guy who did a lot of concept art that you see in this presentation that's coming up going forward. We had Multiplay provide a lot of servers and host Altitude. So basically a whole bunch of people from the community, I mean you guys there have come forward and really supported the idea. But probably the biggest support has come from people buying copies of Arma 2. Because even though I don't get any money, it sends a really clear message, not just to Bohemia, but also to the industry itself. So yeah, maintaining that growth and development as part of it has also been really difficult. And what we're trying to do now is transition it from a mod to a standalone game. And that's pretty difficult, as we're finding. So the question everybody usually asks. The future. So I've made no secret, I want to see it turn into a standalone game. So I think following the Minecraft model is pretty good. There's been people who had thought that it would do really well as a free-to-play, and I think they're right, because free-to-play ultimately seems to be making people a lot of money. But this is about experimentation, and this is not a new idea. I would say at least half, if not all of the audience here has probably thought of this game before too. So it's not revolutionary, but I want to see it happen, and I want to see the experiment continue and it to develop into what we want. At the moment, it's a nice idea, and it's cool and it's interesting, but it's really only, to me, it's really only just a footnote at the moment. So I think what I want to see it happen is it to grow forward and become what it can be. So it needs a sensible pricing structure and sustainable model. And I don't want to compromise on the core design, so it's very hard to do that with some of the offers and some of the studios and publishers that have wanted to develop with it. In the short term, develop the in-game content, so grouping, and I've talked with the people who've come past about what we wanted to do there. And yeah, really push towards that group-oriented stuff. So another area that I haven't really talked about with people is the website and forum integration. We want to fully integrate the game with the website and the forums so that it's all kind of a seamless experience. Push the statistics more because I think they're really cool, and be able to manage your character and clan through online interfaces and stuff like that. The optimization has been pretty important, and you can see an example of that with 1.72 that's out there. Yeah, we've just migrated the central server in preparation for all the sales that are coming up. So this is a little preview that Joe and Clayton, some of our guys on our web team, have been coming up with. So the idea is that when you log into the website, it tracks all your statistics, it has all kinds of information, and you can feel much more connected with your character. So it's been, like most things have happened, we have a whole bunch of crazy events come up, like we had the DDoS, and then we had even performance problems on top of that, with the sales causing almost a kind of DDoS. And so we've been a bit pushed back in that, but expect that to come out reasonably soon when we push towards it. So yeah, there'll be more to follow on that. I'll post that online so that people can find it. Cool. So this, I tried to rush through that pretty fast because for me, hopefully we've got a bit of time. This is really important for us. I didn't buy all those copies. I don't have quite that much money. So you guys sort of bought all those copies, and what you've done is you've sent a message about the type of games you want to see developed. So we want to see the experiment go through. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, otherwise I'll just ramble on. Yeah?
Back near the beginning, you had a karma system for banditry involved, and that kind of got canned and stuff. I wondered, do you have any kind of replacement mechanics in the pipeline?
Yeah, that's a good question. The original bandit mechanic was a bit of a false economy, so people were accidentally becoming bandits. So that sort of forced people into what they had to do. So I think the solution that we're thinking of is more subtle features. And I tried out the whole heartbeat thing. You look at the guy and you can see, you know, if they've got very low humanity, you hear sort of a very faint heartbeat in your own head. We would ideally play with more subtle things, like we were talking about faces, like having your face change slightly, maybe more scars or you know, scowling face or something. Another thing was looting a body, and after you've looted a body, if it was a freshly killed body, you'd have blood on your hands for an hour afterwards or something like that. So we need to play with those ideas, but I think punishing banditry is just totally not within the scope of what we want to do. If we do that, then we'll destroy everything. What we have to do is keep trying with the experiment until we find the right answer. If we compromise on that, then I think, you know, the project just loses its core, its spirit.
The zombie animations have been kind of brought up in several YouTube videos, and I was wondering if there's going to be any new animations for them or something like that, because at the moment they're a bit jerky and they go through walls and things.
Yeah. Are there any animators in the audience? Could you put your hands up? I'm not going to like pick up. Okay, there's a few. Okay, this is what happens when you put a designer in charge of configuring the animations. I was like, the animations aren't fast enough. Okay, I'll just there's a speed value there, I'll just increase that. So there's a big lesson learned there. So yeah, you're exactly right. We've actually done some motion capture animation. The celebrity motion capture guy was actually Marek Spaniel, the CEO of BOS. So he volunteered his time, which is really cool. And I just haven't had the chance to configure those properly. They need a bit of clean up and they need to be implemented. We've sort of had more pressing concerns with performance and that. But those need to be tidied up a lot. The speed needs to be dialed back a bit, but that can only happen when the AI pathfinding's improved a bit. Because they need to be so fast so that when they run in the wrong direction, they eventually catch up with you. So, nice spotting.
Hi, do you see yourself sticking with the Arma 2 engine?
I think it's really well suited for this. I mean, it was already quite, you know, obviously hardcore. And really, if you actually look at DayZ as a core, it's really just a cut down version of Arma. What I would like to see happen is it goes standalone and then go in the direction it needs to. So to develop that group play stuff that I previously put, there's some really special mechanics that need to come out of it. So, for example, I mentioned to a few people, we experimented with building wire fences and sandbags above ground, and it's not really working. So that's where maybe we could have construction and things go below ground. Arma, the real virtuality engine, which Arma's based on, which also spawns Ironfront and virtual battle space and that. It's a really powerful engine, and there's a huge amount of flexibility, and I think that following that engine would be ideal. But it would obviously need to do some pretty specialised things to fully realise what we all want.
Yeah, then. Hello.
Cool. A voice from like nowhere.
Hey.
Oh, there you go. I see.
Got it.
Man with the hat.
A lot of current zombie games incorporate ridiculous elite zombies that explode or spit blood or all of that sort of junk. Are you going to include any of these sort of elite zombies, or are you planning to up the tension of your game by just increasing the mass of mob zombies?
Well, I originally, I don't know if anyone noticed, I don't think anyone actually did, I recently went through and I was very particular about calling them infected and not zombies, because I was trying to convince myself they weren't really zombies, but I really wanted it to be an authentic scenario. That was really important because I felt to me that I needed to feel connected to the situation and my character. So the idea with pushing forward with it is to keep that going. So to make the, we worked on, some people might have seen the concept art of a zombie life cycle. So when they first get infected and their brain's affected, they still retain all their motor movement and a lot of their, what they can do and their thoughts and that. And then as they progress along, they get slower. If they are not able to get food, they're not able to get water, those kinds of things. So that's really what we more want to look at, rather than, like you say, having spitting zombies or that sort of stuff. You know, the idea is that there's been a big infection in the world, and you've suddenly appeared in the aftermath, and you've got to decide how to survive and then decide how to thrive in that environment. Cool. Somewhere else. Whoa.
Are you looking to develop any kind of new environments, or do you think that everyone's already become attached to the sort of existing landscape?
Well, obviously, in an ideal world, I think that something that frustrates a lot of people is the enterable buildings. So I think a key thing would be to provide more enterable buildings. You know, Armour was really never designed specifically for this, but that's what's really cool about the engine and what's really cool about modding is things can be used in really unique ways. I think if we could go forward with a standalone with a Minecraft model, then that would allow a lot of flexibility. So let's say in a few months we came out with something, we put it out there and said, what does everyone think? If there was a really positive response, then we could push it further forward more and just get more and more ambitious as time went on. So, I mean, there's a lot of options there to go into how to generate the terrain, whether you just have more different islands, seamlessly hop in between them. I mean, the possibilities are really endless. And you know, Armour supports a surprising amount of stuff already, and you can get those really expansive, you know, like 500 square kilometre terrains in that. And Chinarius is only 225 square kilometres. Cool.
When you're... Is this thing on? Okay, oh, there we go. When you're making a decision between whether it's realistic or fun, how do you go about drawing that line? Because of obviously something too realistic is not going to be enjoyable, but at the same time, that's your core philosophy.
Yeah, I guess this is something I learned when I was with the army. Like, I think a lot of people focus a lot of time on realistic. They say, this isn't realistic, or, you know, this isn't realistic. And then other people go, well, you know, zombies aren't realistic. And so you get in this endless round discussion that really doesn't make any sense at all. So I tend to focus on authenticity. And the whole purpose of this project was to not look at mechanics. So I sat down and said, I just want to think about how do I want to make the player feel? What situations, what thinking do I want to put in them? So that's really what I think about. I don't think about necessarily what's realistic or what mechanic is cool. I think, how do I want the player to feel? And I want to feel I want the player to feel terrified, I want them to feel frustrated, I want them to quit for 20 minutes only to go, you know what, actually I might play that again. So when I was designing stuff, that was what I wanted to do. And it's quite freeing because you go back to pure design. So instead of, you know, like I was at E3 and I, you know, hear the keynotes and they start talking about all these crazy exciting mechanics, I was trying to do the opposite of that and say, how do I want people to feel? And if you go for those crazy exciting mechanics, the only thing that you can focus on is excitement. And you know, I think maybe the industry is a bit obsessed with some pretty notable exceptions, most of which you're seeing here, you know. Yeah.
Hello. I was wondering, what's sort of your stance on sort of more sort of scripted events, like supply drops, that sort of thing, contrary to the more organic sort of sandbox feel? So which direction are you more focused on, and how are you looking to explore that in the future?
Well, I think if we'd had small numbers, that was probably something we could do to enrich the world. We've got such huge numbers now, and they're probably, you know, assuming we keep going in the direction we are. I think the important thing, and it's really sort of reaffirmed me wanting to have me and the development team focus on building the structure of the world, but the players actually build the world itself. And that's why I want to get more construction and development, more ways for the players to interact and have persistent impact on the world, because that's where the real strength comes from. So I think if we could have some system where the players actually do that and decide how that works themselves would be much better than us getting in and running little events and stuff like that. Because I just don't think that will work so well. We'd initially thought about that when we were still dealing with pretty pedestrian numbers, but I think now it's such that we can really go full-blown, okay, we're going to take a bit of a back seat and we are just going to develop the structure of the world and then let you guys decide, you know, if bandits are causing you an issue and people killing new players on spawn, well then you guys have to do something about it and form vigilantes. But we need to provide you the tools to do that, and that's what we don't have. Cool.
With servers, you like have permanent sort of things. Are you ever going to like release it so that people can just run things to play like locally with their friends, just like offset?
Well, I mean, that would be ideal. But I guess what I really wanted to do, and something I'd seen when I was working as a producer, I think too many people with game design ideas, they try and do all this stuff. And they put heaps of stuff in, oh, we should do this and that. And I think no one's really seriously sat down and looked at multiplayer zombie survival, you know, and in a persistent world. And that was what I wanted to do. So maybe out of that, at the end of it, the tools and the mechanisms and the assets might be there to do that kind of single player stuff. But I think there are a lot of good game projects I've seen out there that are already doing these really great single player and even like sort of cooperative type play experiences. So that it just sort of felt kind of pointless to me to focus on that. And I get a little bit worried when people get really obsessed with that with DayZ, because I don't think it would do that well. There are a lot of other projects, you know, there's a few here that are doing that much better. So I want to keep that focus purely on that core husk of the design, the reason everyone's here now, and follow that through to the end. Without doing that, I think we'll just get lost and we'll all be wearing hats. Yeah. Someone else? Whoa.
Hi.
Okay, over there.
At the current moment, I know it's all in like beta or whatever, so you allow the community to host their servers. Now, when you have it all standalone and everything, are you going to still allow the community to host their sort of their own servers where they live? Because one of the things that I've noticed with DayZ is it's quite a like connection intensive. So if I say I'm an American player and well the servers are in Europe, I'm going to have high latency, and that's going to cost my life in quite a few instances and stuff. So are you going to allow people to host their own servers in their own areas, or is it going to be something that you're going to have to do yourself?
Well, I think that I expect, let's say, for example, we put a year time frame on the project from now, which I'm just, you know, arbitrary pulling out there. In the short term, we have a pretty good idea of what we want to do. But let's say we can do a standalone. Let's say we follow the Minecraft model, we release an alpha in a few months for some really low price point. If that was successful, we'd get more ambitious. And you know, there's several ways it could go. I mean, I think the Eve model is really cool. To me, that would be really awesome if everyone was playing on some large, like, procedurally generated world with some central node. That would be awesome, but also very difficult. So it depends on the success of the alpha, how far we go. In the short term, I think continuing with the model we have now is the best outcome, which is where the community is not only involved in the development, but in hosting the servers. So at the moment, none of the development team actively get involved in the management of the servers, and I think that's the way we have to go now, because it's just too intensive for releasing updates and managing the bandwidth and managing the servers, and we get burnt, you know, from having all the RPD, say, RDP details and the server details and you know, with a few people. So we want to push that out to the community and continue that, and that would be how I would expect to see it continue, just purely from a practical standpoint. But ultimately, at the end of the project, I think if we could get more ambitious, that would be cool. Like maybe make use of peer-to-peer more and instancing and stuff like that. Cool.
Do you think that there'll be like a shopping/currency system to come up?
We talked about this quite early on. A few of the guys who I was talking to get feedback about currency. It made me really uncomfortable because I just can't imagine, at least initially, in some kind of apocalypse, you know, people going, man, we really need to get some money, guys. What are we going to use, you know? I would prefer to, again, that we provide a bunch of tools and options, and then you guys decide how that runs. In terms of bartering and shopping, obviously we do perhaps need some kind of mechanic, and that's where we thought the website might be quite useful in that. Maybe you could run like a trading post either through the web, but then we've got to make sure that it stays authentic, and that's the challenge. We haven't done a lot of thinking about that, but I think whatever the tools we have, it needs to stick with the heart of the project. And for me, that's immersion. So you have to feel really immersed in it. So whatever we can do there is really the benefit. But I don't see us having a currency or money in game. I think that, if anything, you guys should decide what that is. Someone else with a question?
Yeah, I'm more interested in the survival aspect than I am in the zombie aspect, because there's a tendency in this industry to think that all games have to be fun. There's an obsession with fun. And, well, this is a game which is about a desperate struggle for survival. By no means can that be called fun. How are you managing that tension between the desire to provide fun versus a pure survival experience?
Yeah, well, I guess I never really thought about fun at all. So maybe I have to start managing that. I don't know. I'm not really good at that. Like maybe the accidental designer. So for me, you're exactly right. It was really more about the survival than the zombies. The zombies, it's just like if I said, "Hey, I've made a survival game based on an end of the world scenario brought on by peak oil," we might not have this full auditorium. So it's got that initial hook. The zombies are, I'm not going to say they're easy, but I think they're a really good vehicle to describe a bunch of different survival type scenarios, because they give you an antagonist and it's reasonably easy to compute it. Like I say, peak oil gets a bit slow and a bit dry. So that's, for me, it's way more about the survival than anything else. And that's an area, once I've got the zombie mechanisms tidied up a bit more, that I want to focus on. And yeah, I think the answer with this project, or at least your guys' answer that you've said to everyone is, yes, we want games like this. So I think that's why the experiment has to continue along those lines, having that survival-oriented gameplay. I mean, that's huge. And I know Marek Spaniel, the CEO of Bohemia Interactive, he loves that style of gameplay. That's what they had in Flashpoint. I don't know how many people have Flashpoint. I definitely recommend, even though it's an old game, it's really got some brilliant, gritty, cruel survival type gameplay in it.
So I was reading a story about a player who was kidnapped by a group of other players. They threatened him at gunpoint, forced him to give up his weapons, and then they made him go into houses on his own to make sure there were no zombies and all this sort of thing. And I was wondering how much you think about supporting unusual or unforeseen player interactions.
Well, I guess the way I think about it, and early on, for those who are the DayZ hipsters out there, are there any DayZ hipsters? Like, people who played initially? Yeah, they're all gathered in a group over there. I noticed that before. Yeah, I really just wanted to initially say, right, you can do whatever you want. And then there were a bunch of people who played it, maybe because their friends said it was cool, and they were like, but what do you do? What's the point, and how does that work? So what I wanted to do was just support you the ability to do pretty much what you want. And out of that comes the unusual stuff. I think if I sat down and said, I want the player to be able to do this weird scenario, it would feel really forced. So I think that's the aim, like with removing the bandit system and all that stuff, is to try and just stick to that whole, okay, this really is an open world. You really can do what you want. The only limitations are going to be around performance and system. Like, I wanted you to be able to construct above ground, but it just doesn't work because everywhere ends up with sandbag and wires. So that's where we have to get a bit creative. So as much as we can, I think the project should be just about supporting or being gameplay style neutral. So if you want to be some crazy dude who I read about, who there were a whole bunch of new players around, I've got to tell this story because it's really cool. I read this on the forums, and there were all these new players, and they just spawned in, and they were really like being real careful with each other. None of them had any weapons, and they, for some reason, went to the airfield. First mistake. And then they were running around going, wow, look at this, we're in an airfield, this is really cool. And then this dude walks over, doesn't say anything, walks over, hacks their legs with a hatchet. And so they're all crawling around going, why did you hatch our legs with a hatchet? That's mistake number 2. And so they're all crawling around, and this guy's just walking around, he says nothing, and then he just hatchets them all to death. That's emergent gameplay. Yeah. It's a true story too. It's a true story. You can read in the forums. I posted on my Facebook. It's very cool.
Hey, I heard a while ago you were thinking about adding dogs as companions. Is that still happening?
Yeah, I just had a bit of problem. Obviously, we're right at the limits of what Arma 2 does as an engine. So I've had a bit of a problem with how the dogs are implemented. There's a lot of that already in game, and actually Arma 2's new DLC that's coming out called the Czech Army. Actually has some really cool dog missions that are quite good inspiration, so if you're really into your dogs, you should try that out. I think it's on pre-order or something, but yeah, so they are, and I think it's going to be pretty cool, actually. I was hoping to have them in already, but yeah, they're definitely coming in. Now, I don't think there's going to be too much of a balance impact, because probably the worst thing that's going to happen is the forums will flood with stories how their beloved pet got shot. And I don't know, maybe Peter will like sue me or something, I don't know. Hopefully not. Not before Pepsi, anyway.
I've seen some crazy scripting stuff happening. I've seen cows parachuting from the sky, and what are you going to do about how people are somehow injecting scripting things that normally happen within Arma, but it doesn't work in DayZ? It's obviously a big issue with security and other things like that.
Yeah, well, I guess obviously we had a real problem a few weeks ago. It nearly really killed the project. So ARM is a very trusting engine, because it's a military simulator. You know, people would get together in reasonably, you know, moderately sized groups of like-minded individuals, and if your client said spawn a helicopter, then it spawned a helicopter. So we need to evolve with that, and we've got some changes that we've already made, and some ones coming in future, and we work closely with BattleEye and Bohemia as well to tidy that up. So it's just going to be an ongoing thing. As long as there are computers, there will be people trying to modify them, and, you know, modify programs and applications. And to a certain extent, I mean, that's kind of my origin. Like, I made a mod for a game that changed things. So it's kind of hard to get really angry at the people who are making some of the stuff. It's more the people who go in and then just destroy everyone else's experience. So we just have to keep working with that. And, you know, nobody can stand here and say, yeah, we're totally going to solve that. It's just something we have to be ever vigilant of, and if the game went standalone, that's where we could lock everything down. The problem with that, though, is that you do cull some of the ability to make user-created content, which is the whole origin of the project. So that's one of the issues we'll face going from mod to game. How much do we let people modify the data, and, you know, do we just lock it all down as much as we can? So it's going to be a bit of a challenge.
Hi, yeah.
Hey.
Hello. Yeah, at the beginning it was very important for some players to meet other survivors and travel around. And you've taken out the global channel with that, so it's quite hard for that now, and I think it's fostered that environment of shoot first and ask, have you thought about maybe introducing sort of walkie-talkie or CB radio equipment to create a global channel, but one that you have to find equipment for? How are you going to, you know, stop that?
Yeah, I mean, that's been suggested quite a bit. There's a mod called Acre for, if you can understand my accent, for Arma 2 that does that, radios and stuff. And I know the Bohemia guys are really big on it as well. Coding that in, though, is obviously a bit of an issue, and it would be the kind of thing we'd have to look at for a standalone version. You know, I know Evan from PC Gamer's really into that whole, you know, the CB radios, sort of, you know, that almost like trucker sort of, you know, hey, is anybody out there, and that kind of thing. So I think having that element in would be really cool. But I really felt that destroying that the side chat and the global chat was really destroying the immersion, you know, anyone in Juno. As funny as it was, and thank you to the person on 4chan who did that really cool cartoon, but you know, it was just really destroying things. And we wanted to see what would happen if global chat and side chat wasn't there. And I think it's having an interesting effect. So when we bring radios in, like, it's necessary, it's something we'll have to bring in, but I don't think it will be in for a while, because it needs to be developed properly. Cool.
Going back to the up here.
Oh.
Going back to the survival aspect, a player could potentially just live off the land, live off lakes, and essentially Care Bear. Are you ever thought of adding some sort of AI predatory wildlife as an additional threat for that type of gameplay?
Yeah. Oh, I'm shocked you used the C word. Whoa. Next thing we'll have people calling cod kitties here soon. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. Like, that was kind of what I wanted, like that people could play based on their different play styles. So instead of having defined roles like I have spawned in as a medic or I have spawned in as a hillbilly, you know, you could define who your character is yourself. And Marek, the CEO, when I talked to him, he was really big on it as well. If you have certain skills in real life, then those should be transferable in game. So if you can read the stars in real life, then in Arma 2 you can read the stars in game to figure out, you know, the direction you're going in. So I think I would really like to see those survival aspects really extended. You know, the problem, it's not like we can just get a art model of a bear and then implement it in game. You know, it needs to be animated, and there's quite a pipeline involved with that. But I would like to see not only the environment, but then, you know, the animals and stuff in the environment play more of a role with the player. It's just a bit hard to do because they were only really background noise for Arma 2, and that's why if we went standalone, it would allow us to achieve that. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Cool.
Hiya. I think it's really cool that you're looking at implementing ways of giving people construction capabilities. And I remember reading a thread on the forum, a guy had sort of said, well, okay guys, this is it, we're going to start a trading camp. And he outlined a huge program for how he did it, and then he got all these replies saying, well, this is a really nice idea, but the problem is people are just going to go to another server, go to the point where you've built this, and they're going to log in, and they're going to, you know, come at you from behind. There's no possible way you can keep security under those conditions. So I was wondering, how do you possibly fix that security issue, I suppose, because that's part of the mod as it is. It's not an exploit, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I've been mulling on it for a long time. The whole reason I put wire and sandbag in was to see what performance impact construction would have. And that's where, the way I saw that develop, that's when I thought, okay, well, I really like XCOM. It's like one of my favorite games of all time. And Evil Genius, like the whole base building stuff. So I'd always wanted to do that, and I thought that maybe that mechanism might work well. So if, for example, we did underground structures and allowed you to construct underground, then we could actually instance that, which would solve a lot of our performance problems. And it would mean that if someone goes into that instance, it doesn't matter what server you're on, you're all sharing that same environment. You know, it would be great to be able to do that with buildings, but it's just a bit more difficult. So we might have to come up with some kind of narrative why you're underground. But as I, you know, sort of preface everything, this is all, you know, just seat of the pants development, so we'll just have to see. But I think in order for the game to develop to where we all think it should be, it needs construction and the ability to support exactly what you're saying. And I think underground structures is the key because it gives us the performance ability to do that. Yeah. Yeah. So look, thanks everyone for your time, and you can come over and ask more questions and stuff afterwards as well. Just, you know, the final point I'd like to end on is that you know, I didn't buy all the copies of those games, so you guys have sent a really strong message, not just to companies like Bohemia, but a lot of other publishers. And so you guys need to vote for your feet. Vote with your wallets, you know, as to what you want in games. So thanks very much.